Okay, I'm recording, okay? Good morning. You're getting poked by Laura. Welcome. It is it feels like Monday, but it's Wednesday because my kid went back to school today. It's raining here in Vermont on top of a lot of snow. So we're going to have a lot of runoff and water. Temperatures are going to stay like into the upper 40s even into this evening and overnight. So yeah, spring is definitely coming early. The winter was definitely shorter. I would say here it didn't really feel like winter got here till January. So I had all these warnings of things that I read and of people who live here and who've lived here who said, oh, the winter's in Vermont. But I gotta say, well, it wasn't painless for me. It so far has been a shorter winter, and it does feel like spring is here. And I think a lot of people in the rest of the country know that already. And I've heard from a lot of people across the entire U.S., even actually over in the EU and in the UK, signs of spring really being here already. So I'm sure it'll be a little chaotic, but so it is, 9:12 a.m. here in Vermont. And I started my morning looking at and talking about Neptune. And I'm not, just so you know, I'm not an astrology person, but I do find it interesting. Over the course of my life, I've kind of slowly learned about things. I still don't understand houses, planets. Some of them I'm getting to know in terms of the archetypal stuff, in terms of what they sit in, like when they sit in Libra or Aries or Leo, and like how those archetypes interact with those I can't think what you call them, whatever signs. It's a lot. It's a whole study. I used to pay an astrologer for that when I had a job and had money and lived in Los Angeles. He was fantastic. You should check him out. He's got a blog. His name is Stefan with a PH, David Hewitt. And he's got a blog. It's free. It's really interesting. I like the way he writes. He's been doing this, I believe, for over 45 years, or at least I think about 45 years. He lives in Hawaii now. And he's great. He's experienced, wise man who has a good ear for an eye for poetry. However, even though he's fantastic, I have had other people look at my chart since he did my chart for me, and they had different interpretations, and it changed based on who they were. So that's interesting, and I think relates also to like the idea of medicine and some of the things I try to teach people, that I'm giving you one perspective, and it's definitely a different one. But that there are other perspectives, and I think they're all valid to a degree, as much as they resonate with you. They don't have to be valid just because someone has that view, but I think getting as many views as you can is important. So anyway, that all to say that I woke up with learning about Neptune, which is a really far out planet, right? It's very far away. And it's moving into the sign of Aries. And I think Aries is the one that's going to bring the fire element. And if you think about how the year started with the fires in Los Angeles, I can't forget it because it was a deep psychological impact for me. But yeah, it was really interesting to learn about Neptune, because we're going to be in this, Neptune is going to be in this sign of Aries for the next 14 years. So my son will be 23 years old by the time this thing moves out. And it comes fully into Aries at the end of March. But you can usually feel the influence of these changes ahead of time. I know I can. Like whenever I learn about them later, I'm like, oh, I kind of felt that back then. And the first thing I thought of, because this person who was talking about it, and I'm going to preview some of the other things I'm going to be recording in the next day or two. I want to talk to you about that as well. I've got a lot this morning. But he talked about how the Great Fire of Chicago and also of Boston, the two fires that burnt those cities down, were both in the time of Neptune and Aries. So fire is like a really big part of this time, like in a literal sense. And then he also talked about like advancements through things like light and electronics, I think. Not exactly technology, right? Because you think about light and the speed of light and light technology and fire. So he talked about that being a big thing. He gave really specific information. If you want the link to this, tell me. I'll put it in my Patreon for you. And also, if you're watching this on TikTok or on YouTube. You can subscribe to my Patreon. It's free. Please do it. Also, you can follow me on YouTube. Subscribe to me on YouTube. It helps me, as they always say. Like, I'm trying to grow on YouTube. I'm still figuring it out. So the other thing about Neptune was that, right, there's going to be a shift. And he said he meant this really literally. He's like, I don't do clickbait on titles. I don't try to be dramatic. He was like, I put this as a title because I really feel this, and I see it, and so do other astrologers. Like, it's not unique to him. And it's kind of obvious, right? But I find it comforting to know that there's a planet that has an archetype that aligns with what we're feeling. And so what he said is that this is a shift of collective consciousness. And as he pointed out, which I loved, there are many consciousnesses. Like, there's not just one collective conscience, right? There's many. Like, you run in circles, right? You find birds of a feather. And I think we find this through synchronicity. I think synchronicity shows us and tells us that we're on a path of something that maybe it vibrates and you're like, yeah, this is good. Or maybe it's a repeating pattern that you see that you're like, I'm sick of this, right? So maybe it's like something that shows you're in the wrong place. But birds of a feather. So a shift of collective conscious. So prayer has been shown to be a part of collective conscious. They've done studies on this, right? Where they have groups of people who are ill, and they get a big enough group that it's statistically significant. And one group of people is prayed for and the other group of people is not. Nobody knows, but it's like a directed thing. And the people who are prayed for always do better. And it's this idea that our thoughts are connected, our feelings are connected. And we know this, right? Like, this is why media is so important. When there's a message of hope or when there's a message of fear, that can really inject itself into the culture, which is why when people tell me, like, I can't watch news, I can't listen to news, or I have to really be careful about what I consume, they're absolutely right, because it's energy, because it affects our consciousness and it affects our collective consciousness. It's kind of like when we know something's wrong and we're in a group of people and we can all kind of sense it and we can come together, right? Like, one of the things I think of, well, that's a little extreme, I'm not gonna, but I think you know what I'm saying, because we all participate in this, whether you're aware or not. You are a part of a collective conscience. So Neptune in Aries, I'm paraphrasing, he said, is about this shift. And it's 14 years long. And the first year of it, I think he said Neptune is retrograde, which isn't literal, it's just a visual trick. But a visual trick is also a life trick, right? Sometimes life tricks us into thinking that things are wrong or bad when really they're not. So it's teaching us something, is the idea here. So a shift in collective consciousness. And then because of what Aries is and because of the archetype of Neptune, which I can't tell you what that is, you're gonna have to research that. There's an air of spiritual or celestial or esoteric kind of shifting. So more of spiritual quests, coming into a more spiritual age, which I have to say, based on other things that I study and look at, that lines up, because there's been this idea of moving, let's take it into Chinese medicine terms, from a yang era to a more yin era, which is just a pendulum. It's just physics, right? If something goes this way, it's got to go the other way. If something goes up, it's got to come down. So if there's day, there's got to be night, right? It's how things work energetically. So this idea of coming out of a bull market into whatever they call it, a lamb, I don't know what they call it. You get the gist. So this idea that we're coming into this yin time, this time of nourishment, of going in, of recognizing the feminine energy and focusing more on that energy and renewal and birth and life and creation, but also destruction. But nourishing, deeper, the subconscious, the unconscious, loving one another, coming into love out of fear, because right now there's a lot of that happening. So I don't know, just interesting, Neptune. So Neptune at the end of March is happening in Aries, and it will be there for 14 years. And for the first year until January 2026, he said, it's going to be getting us used to it and a little wobbly and weird or something. I don't remember what he said, but January 26th is kind of like here to stay. So my kid will be 23 by the time we come out of that. What else? So I had a question on Patreon, which I loved, and it was about some teeth that had some issues, roots that were sort of overgrown and growing up close to the sinus, and these roots were pulled out. And since these roots, these teeth were pulled out, there's been some dreaming, some really vivid, I think, like bigger dreams. A lot of them is what it sounded like. So I'm going to be recording an episode about teeth and about dreams. So it will include something specific to connect teeth and dreams, and then we'll talk about some things around that that might relate to other organs for people who might be having issues with teeth or with dreams, to give you a little springboard to discuss and maybe ask more questions of me and utilize me. Again, follow me, subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Patreon. That's the way to go. And then I have potentially, it's not confirmed yet, someone that I'm going to interview and maybe share an interview of a special person. I have interviewed people before. I don't get the opportunity much these days, but I have somebody here and I've been talking to them about maybe letting me do that. So I might be scheduling a special interview that way. I haven't decided if I'm going to make that for all members or paid members. I really want to do it for everybody. I want everybody to get the full sense of what I'm trying to do and have the group discussions be, for all of us. If anybody has any ideas about my tiers on Patreon, and like special things I can do for people who do donate and contribute, I would love to hear your ideas about that. But I love that I've been able to make everybody hear the podcast. I think that's really important in a mission. So yeah, so my kid's back to school today, so I'm up and around. I've got a couple episodes coming your way. I just did a video also about the mental labial groove, which is just below the lip and in between two little muscles that sit on your chin. There was a TikTok somebody sent me about pressing that point and some of the effects that you can have of pressing that point, but they didn't mention Chinese medicine or what the vessel was. And then there was a question underneath that somebody put, or a comment about the other things it did to their body, and it was perfect. So I stitched it, I posted that, talked a little bit about this point on the chin in Chinese medical terms and some of the special things about it. So I think that was pretty interesting. So check that out. Maybe I'll post that on my YouTube. Anyway, Patreon, get there, be square. That's where this podcast that you're listening to is posted. And you can ask questions. We can have discussions. I am here for it. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. It's hump day. Yo. Ooh. Let me move this, and we will gab a little bit while I get this going, but let me see who's here, see what's shaking. Hold up. Regal Poison, how you doing, babes? Thanks for all the likes. All right. Whoa, got a lot of people popping in and out. All right. Lots of scrollers. I love the scrolling. Do. I'm giving up my atheism for Lent. Good one. Love that. I did not share anything. That's weird. Regal Poison. There she is. Lag. Thanks, Regal Poison. Okay. All right. I'm going to post this right now. And then I think I'm probably going to go and do another episode on the teeth and the dreaming thing. I think that's going to be a thing. All right. Once I do this, I'll get out of here. So if you have any questions, put them up there. I'll look at them. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Wednesday. Hump day. Preview of upcoming. All right. Thanks for the likes, Jay. Ducky. All right. You just missed the podcast, I think. I'm about to post that. If you have not already, go over to my Linktree, subscribe to my podcast. It is free. It's on Patreon. And if you're a YouTuber, then subscribe to my YouTube. Por favor. Por favor. All right, that's on there. We got that uploaded. Sweet. Anybody have any questions? Nobody. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining. Check out the YouTube. That'll have this on it eventually, but the Patreon's going to have the podcast up in like less than 5 minutes. And I sound better on there than I do on here. It's the microphone. So thanks for hanging. See you next time. I'll be back. I'm going to make new use of my TikTok. Yes, I am.